everyone? Hunter, Sherb, and
Yo.
Kyle back in the house for another edition of the Team Misfit Coaches Podcast. How's it going? We're
hanging in there.
We are in the start of, or I'm sorry, the end of our baseline 2 training phase. It is Wednesday today when this is getting shot, so you guys are listening in the future. But we just finished up phase 2, which had our 1 rep max clean and jerk is probably the highlight. What people looked most forward to.
Highlight for you and I.
That was a highlight for me.
Highlight reel if you come and watch.
Getting to watch all the lifts. How'd it go? So you're at a different. You got to see 2 affiliates worth. How'd that go?
I'd say a pretty good mix. I mean, the crowd over in Wyndham's on a little bit older side than our Portland crew, so a lot of the clean and jerk stuff isn't so much about like, man, it'd be really cool if I can put 300 pounds or 200 pounds in my head. It's like, oh, I see why we do this type of stuff. Like the translation to like real life is a little bit more at the forefront in that crowd as opposed to maybe this crowd that's still kind of chasing a little bit more of the performance angle. So it's fun for me to see someone take an exercise that early on in the phase looks very choppy, very broken up, and see them kind of work through 6 weeks of that and really start to put together what looks like a fluid clean and jerk. So it's one of those movements that we want to continually put throughout the year, but it's nice to stay a small bit of time, like 6 weeks, to focus on it because people make huge strides. I mean, we had people who put 30, 40, 50 pounds from start to finish on their lift. And it's, that is a little bit of a sign of a beginner, but also really like proud of them for being able to do that and like iterate week after week. Like we added 5 more pounds and 5 more pounds. And, what was their max week 1 ends up being their double or their, one of their warm-up singles for their heavy one later on. To me, that's an opportunity to be like, hey, look at all the hard work that you put in. And then like, let's take that type of concept and translate to other movements because the barbell is really obvious. Like the barbell either weighs more or weighs the same or weighs less. Sure. Whereas some of those other things are a little bit less perceivable for an athlete. So I always love the lifting as a demonstration of like, look all your hard work and what it leads to. Now I want them to be as excited about taking 0.2 of a second off, like a split on a 500-meter row as they are at putting 10 extra pounds on the barbell. Yeah, always a little bit easier for athletes to like see the barbell lifts, like you said, are very clear and obvious whether or not things are trending, to the right or to the left. And we as coaches know like there's plenty of different metrics for like improvement, like gauges for improvement that aren't exclusively the weight on the bar. But when it comes to the lifting stuff, yeah, like that's the easiest way for athletes, but we're still halfway through. If you're, not a Team Misfit affiliate subscriber, we just wrapped up a clean and jerk peaking phase, meaning we got athletes to hopefully improve their 1 rep max clean and jerk. We are also about halfway through a 12-week pull-up and push-up progression, which we'll probably get, we'll end up chatting about in this episode. But so you're one of our beginners coaches at Portland. Yep. What have you seen as far as like those beginners kind of like as they've integrated into class, maybe like go through their first like full training phase? Have you noticed anything, whether it's like, how they pick up like the barbell stuff? It's like, maybe the push-ups and pull-ups are improving, or it's just like, no, the fact that they're just here 3 days a week, getting fitter is like making the difference for them.
No, absolutely. So I think for me, watching the beginners, matriculate into class, the biggest thing for me is to see how consistent they are in coming to class. Because, when they graduate, they've been doing 3 days a week with us. And that's what I tell beginners to try to stick with. And the ones that I see consistently stick with that 2 to 3 days a week on a consistent basis, their confidence in the lifts are there, and they're starting to make strides. I think, we had, every single time we do a lift, it's like, what was your score? Whatever weight. Yeah, that was a PR, like constant PRs happening because they're, learning to move well and the weights are moving. So yeah, for sure.
And another thing about the beginners class that's really important is something we've experimented with over the years is different formats of how many days per week, what days are they? And we've sort of found that 3 days a week is a really good setup for the rest of the behaviors. Cause like a big part of what we're trying to teach in the beginners class isn't just like how to exercise and exercise safely. It's like, here's a new habit we want you to have. And you reached out to us because you wanted to make a better change for your life. here's the starting point. You've done 3 weeks of it. You're halfway to what they say is like the checkpoint for creating a new behavior, which is 6 weeks. You're halfway there. Let's give you 3 more weeks of this 3 days a week stuff. And then we can talk more about how your body is feeling. But if you continue along with the 3 day a week format and you immediately jump right into class the second your beginner's class over, you don't have that long period of hiatus, it's a good chance it becomes a new behavior. So one of the things I try to always make sure we're plugging in our beginner's class is like, hey, we just started a new behavior. Let's continue to do that behavior so that it becomes just who you are as a person. It's not something wildly different, because again, what we are teaching for a lot of people is like commitment to something. And it sounds weird to say that as exercise coaches, but like it's probably more important for us as coaches to help athletes be consistent than to do the exact right movement to the perfect, like virtuous, demonstration of it every single time. It's more important they get a little nugget of information, they get a good workout, and they're inspired to want to come back. And we're on them, keeping them accountable so they do come back, because that's really what our job is.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of things that are going to pertain really well to the topic that we're gonna jump into now. Before we do that, real quick, Misfit Summer Camp.
Don't miss it.
Super excited. Don't miss it. First one since pre-COVID. Had a little bit of a gap there, but August 19th, 20th, and 21st at Misfit HQ. This is our most community-centered camp. We've got our, the few months ago we did the quarterfinals prep camp, a little bit more of a competitive focus. Our Misfit Summer Camp is the community focus. Get the misfits from all corners of the globe, so to speak, to come together. We get on the beach, we grill, play some spike ball. There's plenty of fitness to be had as well, but we also get a fair number of questions from coaches who are like, hey, I want to, do you guys have a coaches camp or anything like that? That's a work in progress. It's one of those like very early work in progress. So I don't have a good definitive date or answer on that for you, but it's something that we want to do. But the best thing in the meantime, if you are a coach interested in getting better at coaching, is to come to one of those camps, and just kind of like, we still do the breakout groups for the summer camp. We still, teach skills and provide those nuggets as coaches. And that's a really great way as a coach to kind of get involved and see what, we have the good fortune of being able to coach full time, while we still understand a lot of CrossFit coaches who are super passionate about coaching might still only be, a couple hours a week in addition to another job. So finding that, we're fortunate enough for that to be our profession. So, and we love to share that information with you guys. So Misfit Summer Camp, Misfit.camp to get your tickets.
How hard could that be?
Misfit.camp. Sure.
Easy as it
August
gets.
19th, 21st. Okay. Topic of the day. And we're going to try to weave in as well kind of some of the stuff we're looking forward to for the next 6 weeks of our baseline training phase 3, our third and final kind of out of season training phase before we kind of ramp back into phase 1 for the year. But the question is, and this is the kind of the time of the year that it happens, is you've got an athlete as a coach, you've got an athlete who comes up to you and says, I want to get better. What do I need to do? Now that's a very broad question. Who's asking? Is this somebody who wants to improve their placement in the open? Maybe they're in quarterfinals and they want to see how close they can get to like a semifinals level, kind of on the extreme end of our affiliate kind of demographic. On the other end, maybe we've got folks who, I want to get stronger. I want to get better at gymnastics. I want to lose 20 pounds, right? So we've got a really broad span, but someone comes up and asks you that, how do you start to address that question with them?
I'll let you lead it off. Go ahead.
Pick one of those athletes, or if you've had a conversation with an athlete, you can give the folks a little bit of a background on who that is so they can kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do, as Hunter said earlier, a lot of the beginners here at HQ. So I guess I'll just take it from a perspective of a beginner. Not a specific conversation that I've had with anybody, but just in general, a beginner, someone just wrapped up beginners comes to me. Maybe they've already gone through one phase with us and they want to get better.
They drank the Kool-Aid. They're ready.
Right. They're ready. Yeah. They're in. So they want to get better. My first, question is, what are your goals? What are you specifically trying to get better at? So trying to narrow that down. I'll use an example of last phase, because last phase, if you were with us, we did every day on the clean and jerk days, we did the 10-minute skill EMOM where members got to choose something they wanted to get better at. So kind of falls in line with this conversation. One of our beginners, day one, you know, he's got probably a laundry list of things he could get better at because he's done, you know, one phase with us. And it's like, he comes to me, he's like, what can I get better at? You know, this is a gentleman who has like struggles with his overhead positioning because he's got, you know, poor shoulder mobility overhead. Okay. So we're like, okay, we're going to grab a PVC pipe and we're going to get in the bottom of an overhead squat and hold that for about 30 seconds. 10 times.
That's not a muscle up or a backflip or something cool shit like that.
Bottom of an overhead squat and think about what you've done.
So here, and you know, and this is, you know, his attitude was great because he was like, sweet, sure, I'll do that. I'll go grab that PVC pipe. And sure enough, you know, 5-6 weeks of once a week doing that consistently. I mean, we did a overhead, I think we did a snatch workout this morning. And you know, he went empty bar, rolled through, you know, 6-minute workout, got like almost close to EMOM on that.
Who is it? Jeff?
Andy.
Andy.
I saw him doing his overhead squat holds.
We can go first names.
Okay. Be all right with that. Didn't know if
Andy. Yeah, well, then I can
too.
picture. Yeah, okay. All right. So Andy, like background, tiny bit of background. He's a runner, right?
Yeah.
Like endurance athlete, 120 pounds soaking wet with rocks in his pockets.
Smoked the 1 mile test yesterday.
Smoked the 1 mile.
But yeah, so definitely overhead mobility, something that was just like, always we were doing the clean and jerks, struggled with that jerk overhead, getting that bar straight up overhead. You know, so for him, and also squat depth mobility, you know, so getting those two things, PVC pipe up overhead, trying to get him to sit back on his heels and, you know, get comfortable in that position. And it definitely, you know, over time across the whole phase has definitely was seen. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a good nod to, like, I mean, one great call. So Kyle's referring to just like hey, every minute for 10 minutes, sit in the bottom of an overhead squat for 20 seconds and rest for 40. And that, like, that's a super low barrier to entry, easy to execute, low intensity, like high yield. And we had Bridget is another athlete of ours who did the same thing. Squat depth or squat hip mobility basically was a limiting factor. And I was like, we've told this to competitive, like elite CrossFitters, like, sit in the bottom of a squat for 10 minutes a day. Doesn't have to be all at once. Maybe start with 5 minutes. You do 30 seconds at a time, but accumulate that time in the bottom of a squat. And her positioning is like night and day. It's like, oh, all of a sudden, you mean keeping my torso vertical helps with my 1 rep max clean and jerk?
Well, the great thing with this phase too, I was a big fan of the skill work piece specifically for that reason. You talk to any member at the gym, would you like to clean and jerk more? Absolutely. You know, I wish my percentages were heavier and I was lifting more impressive weight. All right. Can you deadlift that bar? Sure I can. Can you front squat that bar? Sure I can. Can you put that bar over your head? Sure I can. Can you do it all at once from the ground to put it over your head? Nuh-uh. Well, why not? Well, I'm not really comfortable getting into a squat clean. Well, I guess you don't need squat cleans. You probably need to spend time in the bottom of a squat. You know, a lot of the conversations I had around the skill work is like, what's the low-hanging fruit? What is something that's really simple, in air quotes, that gives you trouble that you haven't had time to spend time on inside of class? You know, a double under is another popular example of people who have, you know, mastered the single under and just feel like double unders are years away. 6 weeks of 10 minutes at a time. I had a bunch of athletes who turned, you know, 1s and 2 double unders at a time with a bunch of singles mixed in into sets of 10 and 15 and 20. Like, I didn't think it would happen that fast. I'm like, yeah, you just haven't ever set out to set the time. Just look at the clock and say, all right, I'm going to try to do 20 seconds worth every minute. You know, that's 200 seconds each week. For 6 weeks, it adds up quite a bit. And all of a sudden people are making, you know, marked change in movements that, you know, we as coaches look at and go, all right, like before we worry about the muscle ups and the bar muscle ups and the handstand walking, let's get the squat dialed in. Let's make sure you can put a bar in the front rack. Let's make sure you put your arms over your head with your ribs sticking out. Like, so I was a big fan of the skill work for that reason. It allows someone, regardless of their, you know, position in their journey of fitness, to have something to work on that doesn't need to be overly complicated.
I think it's a good time too to talk about. So this coming phase, we've got our high CNS lift is going to be the back squat. So we're trying to get people's 1 rep max back squats up. Again, today's Wednesday. We tested that 1 rep max, and over the next 5 weeks, we've got a pretty good progression. It'll look similar. If you're a subscriber that have been with us since last year, it'll look similar with the post-activation potentiation stuff. Worked super well, but now's also a time like, so now we've got, let's think about like an athlete who wants to get stronger, like just objectively wants to get stronger. Oh, my squats, like it's like, yeah, like sometimes like you squat pretty well in the warm up and like start adding a couple plates. And it's like, okay, like mechanics are starting to get wonky. Like there's some positioning. Maybe we've got some restriction, some movement restriction, or maybe they're like we get this often. We get a transplant from another gym who maybe they never got coached because their original gym didn't just maybe was a below average CrossFit gym, or maybe they were fit or strong enough to like that skirt by and a coach didn't know what to do with them. So they never got the correction, but their movement patterns are shit. So like I'm, again, high CNS lift coming up. I'm an athlete who wants to get stronger. Maybe my positioning is suboptimal. What are we doing for that athlete? Sure.
It's a great thing because again, what's tough about this athlete is they already potentially and most likely have a opinion on themselves when it comes to this movement. They have set an expectation of like what they're able to do.
Right.
And when you come to them, even though they're coming to a new gym and maybe they're a transplant and you know they sought you out because they wanted a difference of opinion, their initial reaction is going to be a little bit of like, whoa, what are you saying to me? Like, I know what I squat. You're like, yeah, I know what you squat. How long you been squatting that weight?
It also doesn't have to be like a
no, but like for a lot of athletes, it's like, you know what, I've struggled to add additional weight to the barbell. And, you know, then it becomes a conversation of like, let's see you move through some reps. And like you said, you empty barbell or maybe some, 135, 95, it moves really well. But as the plates get stacked on, maybe a little bit of apprehension comes out, and old injuries in their head about going below parallel, what they might do to their knee or their hip or their ankle. And all of a sudden it changes. As coaches, it's our job to be effectively like the person driving the dog sled, pull the reins back nice and tight and say, guess what? You're only allowed to squat as heavy as you can if it looks like the one you just showed me. Right. As soon as it changes, all you are doing is cementing bad motor patterns. And a big part of what we do in our gym is teach athletes, how to get fit and strong. In order for you to demonstrate your level of fitness, aka your strength or your skill or your conditioning, there needs to be a high level of attention to detail paid to how you move. Because if you don't pay attention to how you move, you are effectively lowering the ceiling of your eventual potential. So what we're trying to do here is say, hey, what you've been doing for a long time has gotten you here, and you should be proud of that. That's a lot of hard work. Like, we're not saying that it's not a value judgment on your character. It's saying, hey, I know you came here with the idea of trying to get better. Here's how you get better. And if you are willing to be vulnerable for this phase and say, you know what, maybe I take the knee sleeves off or the belt off, or I'll take the lifting shoes off and I pay attention to how I move, or, think about my old max, take 10% off that and work off that as my new 1 rep max. Oh, weird. All of a sudden at the end of the phase, I'm moving better. And maybe I don't even PR at the end of the phase, but 3 months down the road, we do a random day where it's a ladder where you build in back squat and you PR your back squat. And you're like, that is all of that effort where you were humble enough to say, all right, you know what? I don't know what's best. I am going to someone else for help. Let me listen to their advice and see the long-term gains here, which is what us coaches do. We realize when an athlete comes to us and we tell them to do one thing in class, that it's not going to be, most times, a near 180. You're not going to have someone come to your gym whose back says they can only back squat 225. You show them 1 cue, next week they're squatting 405. No, it's 225, then it's 235, then 245. And you continue to stack these wins. And again, you raise that ceiling. So now we've set them up for a better long-term potential, because, one of the things I like to subscribe to as a coach here is we're doing a, low trajectory to a distant horizon. We want to make sure we're setting athletes up for long-term growth. So if I just let you do it by any means necessary and you eke out a shitty 505 back squat, it's like, cool. Are you hurt 6 months from now? Are you no longer doing CrossFit anymore because you got burnt out? Or, what other problems arise because someone's letting you skirt by for so long?
Got to have the ability to communicate to an athlete like, hey, this is where your ceiling is right now. If we take 2 or 3 steps backward in order to make that ceiling, 10 steps higher, like, that's the trajectory we're on. So it takes, obviously, like I think one thing that coaches could on average do better is just say like, hey, this is going to take time. Like, this isn't going to be fast. You should, like, if you're somebody, let's say take that back squat, for example, like, I don't move super well. Like, my feet are in a weird spot. Coaches always told me to widen my feet out. Like, maybe this is the phase where you convince an athlete like, hey, like, today you forget everything you thought you knew about squatting. Let's refresh. This
Blank
is how
canvas.
it's done correctly. Blank canvas, and we're rolling from here. I mean, one of our, Austin, great example. Someone who has a 450 in the neighborhood ish, or like 430 back squat, whatever. Sixth place at a semifinal, elite athlete, had to retool his back squat over the last year, and he started by taking, he tested his max with a new foot position because his old one wasn't doing it for him. And his max was like 20% less than it was before, and it felt terrible and he hated it. And then over the course of his a 20-week back squat progression, he PR'd all time in his squat because he took the time to kind of relearn those movement patterns. So
I think what you're saying too here, and it's an important note for a coach, is that I think you do a better job of this than I do, is that some things can be subjective and some things can be objective, and you aren't making, again, a value judgment on an athlete when you tell them their squat sucks. You are telling them that you don't like what you see, and here's the path to get there. And as coaches, unfortunately, like you've said before with the people talking about gymnastics and maybe their body size as an issue, if they can't hear it from us, where can they hear that? And if they're actually caring about getting better at something, we as coaches have to be okay with being matter of fact sometimes. I am not particularly good at this. I think that you do a better job of that. But telling someone hey, your squat objectively is not good because you have not fixed X, Y, and Z. I need you to fix X, Y, and Z, even if that means you are performing worse for an considerable period of time, because eventually that is going to lead to a higher potential. So again, it is okay for us coaches to deliver information. What I would say with an asterisk there is you just can't be like, you suck, and then you walk along the other direction. You tell them, this is not what I want. This is not what we want. Here's how you fix it. Get to work, watch some reps. And then each week you circle back and say, are you still doing the right feet position? Are you fixing the knees out? Or whatever the cue was that you gave that athlete, are you checking back in to make sure that they are continuing to adhere to things you gave them, so that you as coaches can see was your cue effective over the long term, or was your cue something that started to make a change and now you need to give them, you need to further iterate because they're ready for the next step. So I think it's important to note that when coaches are giving this information, it is okay to what feels like almost like bluntness from time to time, but make sure you follow that up with some what we call kind candor. You're giving someone a very objective opinion that you have on something, which sounds weird to say objective opinion, but give them some objective information and saying, here's what you do, but then you need to be there to make sure that you're helping them reach that. You don't just tell them that sucks and then walk away.
For sure. So to ask you, so we kind of address getting a little bit stronger. There seems to be kind of a theme happening. A lot of it has to do with a skill in a way. So kind of that neurological adaptation. Maybe for a lift like a back squat, we need to just physically, there's less technical demand than a snatch, for example, but we can still adjust somebody, be like, hey, this is what is holding you back. Let's take 2 steps back to take 5 steps forward later on. Skill lift for the phase, front squat. Yep. Not a super sexy skill lift. It's not a snatch. It's not a clean, but it is usually the limiting factor for people, especially your average affiliate athlete, someone who sits at a desk all day, already maybe has, some tightness. They're not, they don't have elite mobility, so to speak. So we're going to be taking the front squat kind of as the skill lift for the phase. The kind of trajectory of that is next phase, we've got the tempo pull squat clean. And then after that, we're going to try to increase that 1 rep max, but it really starts with the positioning in the front squat. I'm somebody who wants to get better at maybe my Olympic lifts, or even we could take this as far as gymnastics too. How are you, what are we doing for that athlete in that sense?
Well, something that we do, we said that the lift it's the skill lift. So when we talk about the skill lift, we're saying the approach that day on the board, it doesn't say heavy. It says technique. So we're dialing it back. Like you said, take a couple steps back to go forward, to really make sure that we're solidifying these positions and we can move well before, trying to load up heavy. So what I say to those athletes that want to get better at, say, the Olympic lifts or the, muscle ups, gymnastics movements is, you take those steps back and you go say it's gymnastics and the muscle ups, let's hop over to the low rings, and if we can do perfect low ring transitions and pull ourselves over these low rings, then we can take a trip over to the high rings. Because, I mean, just like, with the snatch or a more complicated lift, you take it off the floor, you might be really good, going from the hang where you take less steps out of the equation, but then you go from the floor and everything screws up.
Yep.
So taking a couple steps out of the equation in those higher like skill movements like the squat clean or the like muscle ups, and really just dialing in on, kind of like the finishing aspects of it, so that you can, then make your trip over to the, high rings or the full on squat clean eventually, and, move better.
Yeah, I like that. That's the, I think one of the easiest ways and the best tools we as coaches can have in our toolkit especially when the movement becomes more technically demanding, it's just to break it into digestible parts. It's the same way you would attack any complicated problem is let's not maybe look at the whole thing as one entity, but let's try to break it apart into manageable chunks. And if it's a lift, it's like, let's do things with a pause, or let's only do it from the power position. Because that, it's like, if you start off the floor poorly, then everything else goes poorly. If your kip on your rings isn't very good, or maybe you're not even strong enough to do a really mechanically sound push-up, like we don't have any business being on the ring. So it sounds like it's a good, to be able to break a movement down into its component parts and really just hammer home those individual elements. That's kind of what I'm getting at, just being willing to do that.
Yeah, being willing to do that. And then also as coaches, remembering to our members and affiliate members, because that's basically who we're talking about here, is that give them one thing to get really good at. With all these things we're talking about, like the squat clean and the gymnastics movements, there's 1,000 things to work on. Give them one thing to really hone in on, when you're coaching them. So fewer cues, but more specific to the one thing that they can get, check a box, and then they can move on to the next.
Yeah, a coach would be better off having one objective for the day and 15 ways to describe it than to have 15 different things to do and one way to describe each. You always, as coaches, want to have, again, let's use the squat clean, for example, and you say that our goal today is to get everybody to move their feet. Mm-hmm. You need to show them visually how to do that. Yeah. You can show them, visually multiple ways. You can have yourself do the movement. You can draw lines on the ground and have them jump to the lines. You can have them have barriers where they have to hit someone, hit a plate with the side of their foot. There are 15 different ways to do that. But if you give them 15 things to do, they're just going to look at you and go, and then do 0 of them. Right. So again, I think that's a really important point here, is that inside of the hour-long class, you want to make sure you deliver some value to members. And sometimes that's nothing more than the encouragement to, hey, good job, you showed up today. I'm proud of you for getting in here. You've had a rough few weeks, and I'm glad that you're here. And other days, it's like, you know what? You've all done a really nice job controlling the barbell and the pull off the floor, because we spent the last phase tempo cleaning, but all of a sudden we started to speed things up and things went screwy. Let's back things down again, and let's do the tempo pull as part of our skill work today. Oh, great. Look, it's back dialed in. The next week, everyone's hitting weights significantly more proficient than the week before. It's worth it. So again, I think as coaches, it's important to think about your entire class plan and just be like, all right, maybe we've got 2 sections today's class. What's the one thing I really want to highlight in the first section? Maybe what's one thing to highlight in the second session, and leave it at that. But once you have those 2 things, ask yourself, how are different ways to communicate that? Because you're going to have people from all walks of life. You're going to have auditory learners, visual learners, and you're going to have people who need the tactile cue. You need to be ready with all of those. And if you don't have that developed, or you like to use one at a premium versus the others, start mixing the other ones in, because that's how you're going to develop as a coach, in the same way we were asking our athletes to develop when they come to our gym.
Yeah, I think that's something that I if I don't pay attention to it on my own, I'll end up giving an athlete, I'll say hey, do this, and they'll be like, nice. And then the next lift, I'm giving them something totally different to fix. So every lift has something different to fix, but we forgot about the other thing. So to your point, kind of picking one thing, and maybe it is, you have a general idea, the foot movement thing, and it's okay, this will apply to 70% of my class. I can really just focus on that. We'll ignore the rest for today. We'll worry about that, the next time we do this. But maybe you've got an athlete who's yeah, their foot movement's fine, but they, their pull is off, or they're, in their gymnastics, their kip is kind of wonky. We can, personalize that coaching a little bit. But I think, having that one thing to focus on, it makes your job a little bit easier. It gives you kind of different ways to approach the same problem. But it's also helpful to the athlete, where it's just if I'm doing something wrong every lift that's different than the thing before, like, am I doing anything correctly? And like, are any of these cues from the coach actually helping? Or am I just kind of like, I wonder what I did wrong on this lift or that lift. So, okay, moving on to gymnastics. Now this is a good one because it's like, we can take this a few different ways, and I think you guys will. I want to get better at, I really want to get better at handstand push-ups or muscle-ups. So muscle-ups are going to be the gymnastics focus of the phase, keeping in mind that we are also like our auxiliary / GPP kind of quote lift will be the continuation of that push-up and pull-up program, where we will start to kind of involve things like ring rows, strict ring dips for athletes who have the capacity to do so. So a lot of folks will still end up doing those banded pull-ups and push-ups to develop that capacity. But with the gymnastics focus being the muscle up, it kind of like, we did a bunch of pull-ups and push-ups. Now let's, get athletes who can be on the rings, developing some capacity there. But now we've got athletes who, you can pick your spectrum of, I don't have this movement. I have very few muscle ups, like depends on, if the moon's in the right place in the sky, or I have some of them, but like when I start to breathe hard, things go haywire. Like, how are we helping the athlete who's just like, I want to get better at gymnastics. I want to get better at the sexy gymnastics.
Sexy gymnastics. You always get to go back to like, what do your basic gymnastics look like? Like, what's great about the last handful of weeks, we've had an opportunity to watch how athletes move around a pull-up bar, which is obviously a little bit different than dynamic rings, meaning that they can float in space. But you've had an opportunity to see how athletes move through those things. We need to talk about requisite strength and ability to do these things safely. So what's both great and bad about CrossFit, great that he gets a bunch of people caring about movements that outside of the fringe community of gymnastics, like no one gave a shit about until about 20 years ago. If you could do a single handstand push-up or even had a set of rings. Like, I legitimately remember in 2010 and 11, I want to go buy a set of rings. Well, you got to send, a stamp in the mail. 6 months later, a pony delivers a set of rings that are made out of birch bark and like, I don't know, fucking hemp rope, like random shit. Like, no one cared about these things. So it's really great that CrossFit brought that to the forefront, but at the same time, because it did, people literally want to be able to walk in the gym first day and swing on the rings and do 10 muscle ups. Like, sorry, that's not going to happen. Let's make sure you are safe enough to do these things. So, our beginners class is a great place to start. It's kind of a screening opportunity for us coaches to see how an athlete moves, but not everybody gets this opportunity. Sometimes you're having someone come right off the street. They want to get better in muscle ups. All right, let's talk about your pull-ups and push-ups. I'm not going to teach you how to do a muscle up until you can show me 5 pull-ups and about 15 push-ups, or maybe 5 ring dips, because that's going to show me that you have the strength and integrity in your joints that you can be on those implements and be safe. Because again, number one goal for the gym is to keep you healthy. If I'm getting you hurt, I'm doing the opposite. So I want to make sure that's kind of step one is safety.
Yep.
Step two, once I've kind of demonstrated that safety, is I want to see what these movements look like. So if I haven't seen it before, I'm going to ask you, show me some pull-ups and, push-ups. And if I'm not perfectly pleased with how they look in terms of safety, I want to say, you know what? I can show you how to hop up on the rings and maybe swing a little bit, but you're not going up and over and doing a muscle up yet. You're going to stick around with some basic skills. So maybe there's the athlete that's going to be doing, an alternate EMOM for 15 minutes, 1 minute's push-ups, 1 minute's pull-ups, 1 minute's swinging on rings. And you have them go through that a few times, and you get to watch them kind of figure out body awareness and figure out where they can move better. And we're there to cue them through better movement. Now, once that athlete has demonstrated the ability to do those things, we have a different conversation. So like, all right, now it's time to put a little bit of the, the safety's there. That box is checked.
So
you have the strength.
Do strict pull-ups, good quality push-ups. We're moving reasonably athletically. Like, yep. Okay, carry on.
So now we're asking, all right, let's start to sprinkle in a little bit more of a skill. You have the requisite strength you need. Now we need to up the skill element a little bit. So like what you said earlier, Kyle, bring them over to the low rings. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you have high rings that aren't like all the way up, way overhead, right, but maybe like chest height where you could practice maybe a jumping muscle up turnover. You'd want to start a little bit slower. You'd want to start with the very controlled, super slow, strict muscle up progression type of thing, because, you can do that with a fraction of the athlete's weight. So we're not asking an athlete who's brand new to show me your first muscle up and do it strict. Like, that's not going to be how that goes. So we show them that ability. And once they start to hang on to that, it's like, all right, let's try the higher rings and do the jumping transitions. Those look good. All right, let's talk about the next steps here. So basically, if you can imagine almost like a dial on like a speaker, you start really, really low, down on like a 1, which is, being safe, showing the strength. And as they get a little bit more proficient, you turn the dial up a little higher, which either means, do the movement a little bit faster, a little bit more complicated, a little bit more on the line in terms of like what you have to be able to do in terms of capacity. And as they continue to develop, you just crank the dial up a little faster, and a little faster, and a little faster until the point where you're like ready to take them over to the high rings and say, let's see what happens.
Kyle, jump in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so jumping. Yeah, so jumping.
You can jump in there or take it wherever you want. But yeah,
jumping in and ahead.
Yeah.
Probably to the athlete who quarterfinal workout comes up. They got the 3 rounds of 10 muscle ups, and they can complete that workout, but they still want to get better at that, because we have a handful of those athletes at our gym. For those guys, it's watching them do reps, not necessarily under fatigue, watching their movement pattern, and then trying to, like we said earlier, pick out one thing that they can focus on. Just because we're talking gymnastics and muscle ups right now, there's many things that you could do to help improve those movements. So I like to video for myself to see, because I sometimes I'm working on them by myself, video for myself to watch how I'm doing them, but video for there we go. Video it for the athlete so they can see what you're trying to help them get better at. Give them one cue, and then maybe it is, in between classes, setting up a 10-minute EMOM where they are just, taking whatever it is. Maybe it's like 30 seconds of, 1 to 3 like perfect reps with that focus in mind.
Yep.
So basically, like, we're programming, this phase, trying to build the muscle up capacity. There's going to be similar things programmed like to that, where athletes who kind of, have them, but definitely have room to refine them, will be able to, get up there and just try to practice consistent, smooth reps with like one focus in mind.
That's a interesting bridge too, right? Because then you get athletes who maybe they can do a couple of them, and it's like, now that it's like, oh, I can do them, now I want to do a lot of them. Well, it's like, got it, understood, but like the few that you do maybe aren't the most mechanically proficient. So like we still don't rate throwing this in a Metcon under intensity just yet. The quarterfinals workout that you talked about has all kinds of different barriers to entry as far as like the muscle overload and the fatigue and stuff like that. And I had a conversation with one of our members today, Al, who was like, what drills should I do to get better at muscle ups? And I really wasn't sure where his muscle ups were at. And I was like, can you do them? And he goes up and does like 4 pretty solid ones. And I'm like, if your muscle ups look like that, you probably need to just spend a little bit of time, the EMOM sort of thing. It's like, okay, if the most muscle ups you've ever done in a session is 10, then it's like, great, 1 muscle up every minute for 10 minutes, like you said. And then next week, it's maybe the first 5 minutes, you get 2 muscle ups, and then you do 1 for the rest of it. And then the following week, it's 2 muscle ups every minute. We just build kind of that, gradually build in that volume with the mechanics that you're talking about, right? Because if we're practicing, if you've got athletes who want to get better at something and they're technically not proficient and they're just practicing the inconsistent, lack of proficiency type of movement, they're going to run into the first topic that we talked about, where their ceiling is too low.
And I think this is another important thing to say at this juncture of the conversation is that, once an athlete gets 2 muscle ups, that doesn't mean every time muscle ups come up in a workout, they're doing muscle ups.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important thing to say here is that, you've demonstrated the ability to do 2 single muscle ups outside of the bubble of intensity. You are literally just doing them. Your sun is shining, the moon's in the right position, over Jupiter, and you can do 2 muscle ups. Great. Now let's ask ourselves, what is the stimulus of this workout? Are you, just because you can do that outside of intensity, does that mean it's in the workout? No. Same reason why I wouldn't ask you if your max clean and jerk is 245 and the workout calls for 15 of them. I'm not going to say, well, you can do that once, you might as well do it 14 more times. That's bad coaching. So we need to ask ourselves, as we're watching our athletes develop, we're giving them those EMOMs to build the capacity, but inside Metcons, if the class workout is 8 and we expect people to do 3 sets of 8, and we expect most members to do that in 2 sets, the member that's coming to you that wants to get better at muscle ups isn't fighting through 4 sets of 2 to get to 8. They're doing 2 sets of muscle ups. So maybe their workout's 4 muscle ups every single round.
Right.
And as coaches, we want to allow athletes to demonstrate movements they have, which we also need to think about what is the stimulus of the workout so that they can feel the way they're supposed to feel when doing these things. Because if Hunter and I do a muscle up workout and he gets done and he's like, man, what a great cardio workout. I got 15 rounds then. I'm like, cardio, eh? I did 3 rounds. We did not do the same workout, and we're probably feeling very different about our capacity, and there's a good chance he improved his fitness and I just got a glorified skill session. And again, occasionally that's fine. But if that's your everyday, you're not going to see the fitness improvements that you're looking for your members. And you're going to have members who are asking you questions of why am I stuck here and why have I been stuck here for so long?
Okay, last one here. So basically our in WOD focus, if you follow Misfit Athletics, you know that once a phase we kind of throw a lift inside a workout where it's percentage-based lifting in a workout. With our affiliate stuff, we will typically alternate back and forth. Maybe these are the kind of days where we get that long, it's only conditioning, it's a long cardio session. It was like our 5K row this past phase. That was a real treat. I skipped that day.
Sick that day.
I went to a different country that day.
Parakeet was hungry.
Kyle literally went to Italy to avoid his 5K row. But these are the days where we either do for this coming phase, we're going to mix in a whole bunch of sled work, or it's our cardio day. It's when we do use that full hour as best as we can to get maybe the long stimulus, or maybe it's just a lot of shorter intervals, but it takes a long period of time to do. Basically energy system work. You've got an athlete who maybe, let's say, wants to, it's kind of weird because the energy system stuff applies to the whole spectrum, right? So you've got an athlete who wants to get fitter. I want to improve my placement in the open or quarterfinals. Or maybe it's just like, I want to lose 40 pounds. And those seem like the opposite, but more often than not, they have kind of that one commonality. And it's that you got to get fitter. Like your conditioning needs to improve. And these are the kind of days where the programming really allows for, everybody can bike, everybody can row, most people can run reasonably well. It's that energy system kind of training that athletes need. They need to know they need to have a machine or a workout where they can go really, really hard for 10 to 20 seconds. That's why we do the bike sprints as often as we do, or you need to be able to row 3 minutes, like pretty hard, that kind of like terrible time domain, or go as, the 5K row, go as far as, being able to hold a pace over a long period of time. So how are we helping athletes who, maybe on one spectrum? Why don't you go, let's go with the I'm not super healthy, I want to get fitter kind of person sure.
Yeah, I mean, that conversation immediately goes back to the ability to make sure you can stay moving kind of at all times.
Yeah.
The stimulus that we deliver to athletes in our classes, we got gas, we got muscular overload, and we got cardio. For a lot of those athletes, we need to find the version of workouts that allows them to not stop moving. That is like the number one thing here, is making sure that as coaches, we figure out what the appropriate dose is for every athlete that attends, and making sure that we look at these folks that may be a little bit less fit, maybe a little bit overweight or deconditioned, and be like, what is their version of this workout that allows them to play along with the absolute fittest person in class? That might mean changing weights, movements, rep schemes, workout styles. Very often we'll have someone brand new and we have to talk to them about like, hey, this isn't a value judgment that you're using less weight. It's because I want you to get a certain amount of rounds. And this is what I think will allow you to do so. And that's your only goal today. It's not hitting the RX weights on the board or, doing the handstand walk or the muscle ups. It's, hey, I want you to have a version of this that allows you to basically not stop moving. And, within a certain degree, that might mean as coaches, an AMRAP turns into an interval. Because we know that beyond 2 minutes, they're going to be hands on knees, gasping for air. And our job is to make sure they can come back to CrossFit the following day or in 2 days from now. So we don't want to overwhelm them too. So early on, it's about making workouts very accessible so they can stay moving and realize that, like, for some people, this hour is the only hour of their day where they're active outside of walking, to and from their car to the office or to the grocery store or wherever they're going in life. So we want to make sure that hour is about movement, and we're going to give them a dose that allows them to stay moving. And, that for a lot of athletes, that does mean you don't do some of the sexier things or the heavy weights early on, because again, you're not ready to be able to do those. the way that I'm asking for today. So what's your version of that today? And here is that version.
You kind of hit it early in what you were saying. You talked about the stimulus, and we provide people with like that, the desired stimulus so that both the coach and the athlete can make that appropriate scaling choice in order to hit that stimulus. For an athlete who's like brand new or maybe like highly deconditioned, I would argue that matters significantly less than it does like what you said. Like, we need to find a version of a workout that just keeps this human moving. Like, it doesn't help, if it's a muscle overload workout where we're trying to really like fatigue an athlete's upper body, like that doesn't help necessarily that super sedentary person nearly as much as maybe like, let's make sure we mix in a bike in here. They can still do the push-ups or the, a ring row instead of a muscle up, whatever. But we want to make sure that we're giving them the workout that enables them to keep moving, to bring that level of conditioning up.
I don't know if you say this to your beginners, Kyle. I imagine you say it
This is exactly where I was thinking.
some way or another. But early on in the month, like the very first month, my only like goal from our beginners is like, hey, I want you to find a pace that allows you to stay moving first class to 10-minute AMRAP. I want you to move for 10 straight minutes. I don't care how fast it is. You could crawl the entire time, but as long as you move for 10 straight minutes, you're doing exactly what I asked of you today. And as long as you stay safe, I'm never going to stop you in a workout. That's another thing I'll tell our athletes in beginners class is like, when I give you a cue in a workout, unless it's supremely dangerous, I want you to just try to keep moving and try to adjust on the fly. But the goal here is just to move for 10 minutes and then move for 10 minutes a little bit faster, then move for 10 minutes a little bit faster. And then if you continue to do that, iterate over time, it's not, hey, I sprinted for 90 seconds, puked for the next 8.5 minutes of my workout, and then I didn't come back ever again. It's, hey, no, I was able to do 10 minutes. Why can't I do 10 minutes a little bit faster? Or why can't I do 11 or 12 or 13 minutes? So allowing them to, over time, build confidence in the ability like, oh, I could move for 10 straight minutes, which means I probably could move 10 more minutes at this weight or this movement or that movement. It's basically building their own confidence to do so in a manner that's not so much about your score or the weight you used or the movements you did. It's about basically just move your body for 10 minutes.
Right. I mean, just going to jump into the kind of like beginner track here, drop a name. Elliot just finished beginners last month and has been consistently crushing it at like, I think 6:15 in the morning daily since wrapping up. Day one, we had 10-minute AMRAP that Sherb just talked about. Couldn't stay moving. We got burpees, we got air squats, we got light dumbbell snatch in there. Couldn't stay moving.
Bigger dude.
Bigger dude.
Yep.
But just fitness deconditioned, which just couldn't stay moving. And with the consistency and that message of like every time we work out, we're gonna find a version that allows you to stay moving. In that consistency across like just the beginners class. I think it was like last week, day 2, he did a workout that was 10 rounds of 10 wall balls, 8 dumbbell snatches, stayed moving for 13 straight minutes. Didn't stop.
Sweet.
And then jump into class. I think first class they got was like a bunch of squats and burpees, if I remember correctly.
Perfect.
So, first class in with the main class. And again, stayed moving. I mean, like, and it didn't, as me as a coach, like I saw it. And even before I got a chance to be like, hey man, like, look at this. He said it to me. So it's just like,
sweet. That's
mean,
great.
it was a really cool moment, but it's like what Sherb's talking about, the meeting the stimulus that the coach is talking about at the whiteboard that's written up there, whatever that means for you.
And a cool moment with that, on that same topic, I have a member named Sean over in Wyndham who's been coming for probably 2 years. And yesterday he said his first mile without stopping since he can remember, like being like back in like middle school. He's like, that's the first mile I've ran without stopping since I was in my like teenage years. He's probably almost 40 now. So like, that's a perfect example of why the stimulus matters and why what we're talking about is so important here. If you want to set an athlete up for long-term success, you got to create breadcrumbs on the trail for them to follow. And that's just day after day of getting a good workout, staying safe, getting a good workout, staying safe, getting a good workout, staying safe. And before you know it, you've strung a week, a month, 6 months, 5 years of CrossFit in, and you're doing things that are like your 5-year-old self, when you started CrossFit, like, no fucking way am I doing any of those things. And all of a sudden they can become, very accessible because again, you've continued to help them see the path and they've continued to walk it.
All right. Last athlete, you go first. I know you're going to want to probably jump in on this too. You've got an athlete who is, let's say they're they have the requisite strength numbers and maybe they do have a lot of the gymnastics skills, and they're just like, I want to get better at the open, and you look at their open, maybe you're just like, okay, yeah, let's have a conversation about that. You pull up the CrossFit Games leaderboard and they're 7,000th. So for somebody who wants to be competitive, maybe 7,000, that maybe putting a number on it's not a great idea, but there's maybe clearly a disparity between
Right.
where you might expect them to be on the leaderboard compared to what you see them doing in the gym every day versus, reality. So
like super strong athlete.
sure,
Can
something like that, or maybe they can do all the movements. Like there's just where the connection is maybe it's the condition
Right. I mean, and that's kind of what
give
the
you
open
the answer. Yeah,
Right.
but yeah.
But I did.
I was headed there. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what the open calls for is like, how basically, they're looking for the start of the finding the fittest person on earth. So, trying to put all those high skills together, but with like the fitness behind it. So like for that athlete, I'm asking them, what's their potentially like, what's a pace they could hold for doing, if we're going to pick a machine, say like a rowing machine, and like we just had the 5K row, like what's their split, what's the pace that they can hold for that duration of time, and being like, is that something that they can improve on?
Okay, so kind of maybe more targeting like we were talking about, like the machine based stuff for like an energy system perspective sort of thing, or just like using the machine.
Well, not necessarily energy system, more energy system, but allowing them to be, or having them think about how consistent can I be over and over again, to try to help move that needle for them. Because if they have all the tools, but they can't use them for a very long time, then they're not going to be able to, make that jump that they want to make.
Sure.
So, I don't know.
So, it's funny because when we started this conversation, I didn't know if we were going to go directly into like the individual categories of people, or we were going to talk like big picture. Right. So
I didn't either.
I don't know. That's fine. I'm going to go back to more of the big picture type of stuff and kind of talk a little bit more theoretical as opposed to like anecdotal with like examples. First thing is, are you measuring whatever you're trying to get good at? If you aren't measuring, how the hell are you going to know if you're getting better or worse at it?
Point.
So let's first define what you're trying to accomplish, and then figure out how do you measure that. Like that needs to be the number one goal. Some things are really pretty black and white. If you're heavy and you want to be light, you're measuring how much food you're putting in your body, and you're looking at the scale and seeing if it's changing with whatever changes you're making. That's a pretty easy one. Other ones, like the open example or the competitive example, is like, all right, you were 7,000 this year. You want to be 500. Well, you're probably not going to make that jump in 1 year. So let's talk about, the next part of this conversation is the realistic expectation, is working with someone who knows a bit more about what your goal is and using them as a sounding board to be like, all right, what can we do to make iterative process to go from 7,000 to 500? And then it becomes a conversation like we just talked about for the last like 30 minutes or so, is like, what are the components that are going to allow you to take what you are measuring and turn it into, I have this goal and here I am now. Here is where I want to be. How do I get there? And that's more of the conversation we were just having here for the last half hour. So, to summarize, it's basically make sure you have a goal you can measure that's objective, right? I want to feel better is a little bit subjective. And there are ways to measure that are objective, but we're looking for hopefully an objective measure of whatever the goal is. I want to dance at the wedding. I want to be able to hike Katahdin, a mountain in Maine. If I want to lose weight, if I want to be better in the open, these are all things we can measure. Then reach out to someone who knows a little bit more than you do. In our space, pretty easy. Your members come to you, and if you don't know, you go find someone who does know. Right. Figure out what the best plan is to help them get there. And then as coaches, being honest. I think a hard part of our job, and it's not because we don't want to be honest, it's because we have empathy for our members, is having those conversations like, I'm sorry, but you going over there and doing your snatch waves in the corner when you need to be sitting your ass on a rower and do intervals all goddamn day? Stop snatching. Go sit on the rower. You're wasting your time. You already have awesome strength numbers. Your 5K row is 48 minutes. You probably shouldn't worry about your snatching. You need to go sit on a rower. So being able to have that type of, honest but empathetic angle to our conversations is a big part of our job, and can sometimes be looked at as a difficult part of our job because no one wants to be the bearer of bad news if someone feels like they're working harder and they're not getting to their goals. But that needs to be our job, is to be like, listen, you're coming to me because you've struggled to figure this out on your own. I watch you every single day when you're here. I've got a good perspective on where you are currently. Here's what I think is going to make you closer, allow you to be closer to your goals. And let's do that. And as coaches, we implement them for a short period of time, have some sort of way of tracking the change. And if the change goes good, great. Give them the next iteration of that change. Doesn't go great, have the humility to be like, you know what? That didn't really move the needle the way I wanted to, or maybe it didn't do what we wanted. Let's try this instead. And you're constantly researching ways to, get athletes stronger, or improve their conditioning, or help them with skill work, which is why, at Team Misfit, we try to deliver so much content in the form of videos and tips and whiteboard briefings, is to help give you coaches ammunition. So when an athlete comes to you, you can have these conversations that we are having as well. So don't feel like you're the only person on the island having these sometimes what feel like awkward conversations. We are also having them, and we want to encourage you to continue having them, because the ability to be honest and open about your members, even if it sometimes feels like you're not being the nicest person on the block, is eventually going to get these athletes to reach their goals, which is going to be more rewarding to them than the awkward conversation you have ahead of reaching said goal.
It'll still be awkward, but it'll be rewarding afterward.
Yeah, it used to being awkward. That's fine.
I think we did it. So kind of like summarize here, and I'll kick it over to final thoughts with you guys. But what I'm hearing a lot of is like I think it was already unplugged. So
wait, has anyone heard of the entire time?
Podcast canceled. I'm just gonna unplug this. So we've got a bunch of different possible kind of scenarios, combinations of athlete and goal, and then on our end, it's like, who's the best coach? Who's the most qualified coach? Because odds are you've got a coaching staff of individuals with different strengths and weaknesses. But there's a few kind of commonalities that I'm hearing. A lot of it comes down to consistency. If we're having that conversation with members who want to get better, among the first things that you're asking, you kind of talked about the goal, like having a goal. You've talked about, having something measurable, well, I want to get better at this. Well, what does better mean? Does that how do we make that objective? But a lot of that ties into like just being consistent in general, right? It's showing up 3 to 5 days a week, whatever it means for that athlete and their goals. And a lot of times it's holding people accountable to that. I think we do a pretty good job of, like, Lydia, one of our coaches, is our attendance guru, who's just like, I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. You're on my hit list, and like, boom, you get an email from Lydia, and they're just like, fuck. And then sure as shit, they're back in the gym, within 48 hours or something like that. It's like, good, it worked. So we're talking consistency. We're talking about the non-sexy stuff. Sit in the bottom of a squat. That's a pretty specific thing, but it's like, hey man, like you want to get better at the lift, but your feet are flat, your hips don't, your knees don't bend beyond 90 degrees. Like, we got other problems. Sorry, sure. Yeah, sorry. Ankles don't bend beyond 100 degrees. But we're, it's having those conversations and being willing to tell the athlete, like, what the actual thing is. And kind of like you said, like, if somebody's coming to you at a CrossFit coach asking you for fitness and health advice, and you are not giving them the honest actual thing, whether it's like, what needs to happen is we need to take 10% of body fat off. Like, we need to increase lean body mass or reduce body fat. That's not a comfortable conversation. We've talked about that before. Like, it's, hey, your positioning isn't very good. You need to do this. Because a lot of times it is these smaller, less sexy things that we can tell an athlete. But if we are not the person who's going to give them the honest answer, like, who the fuck is?
And
like,
no one will.
Their mom, their wife, their brother, their best friend, like, those people aren't going to tell them what they need to hear. Like, that's on us. So, final thoughts.
Kind candor as a coach goes a long way. Tell them honestly what they need to hear. Deliver in a way that makes them want to do it.
The latter's important.
That's really important. Not just, hey, you suck, but hey, we're not very good at this yet. Here's how you get better. That is the right way to frame this conversation. So, I think who I got that from is actually Gary V. Gary, how do you say his last name, Ted? I'm going to always butcher it.
Vaynerchuk?
It's not Vayneryuk or something like that. Anyways, Vaynerchuk. Anyways, his thing is, he likes to be a systems and people kind of person. He likes to talk about, someone comes to him like, how do I be successful? And his first thing he usually gets back to is like, how are you treating your staff and how are you communicating with those people? Like, if you want things to go a certain way, like as a boss, it's not like, hey, you did these 3 things wrong. It's like, hey, I saw that these things weren't up kind of our standards. How do we make them better? And he's always trying to deliver messages to his people and his teams in kind candor. He wants to be honest with them, but he wants them to succeed. So he's going to give them a path that is, hey, I understand it didn't go that well this time. Here's how we make it better. So I guess to summarize would be kind candor goes a long ways when you're a coach.
Message isn't going to be received unless it's communicated in a way that's like
it feels uplifting. Yeah, it feels uplifting
and genuine. If it's just you suck, like here's what you need to do, that's not super motivating.
No.
Right. I mean, and then even before the conversation happens, to allow for that question even to be asked of you. I mean, having that relationship with your members.
Agreed.
That's a great one.
Just knowing your members. I mean, I kind of have like a front row seat to that, sitting at the front desk every single day when everybody walks in and just say, hey, ask
Kyle's the gym therapist. Not paid.
Yes.
He's not paid enough to be the gym therapist.
My resume keeps getting bigger.
Yes.
You need to get him like that booth like Lucy. It's like donate, put a nickel in when you come by and talk to me for a few minutes.
But yeah, so just having that open door kind of relationship, so people feel comfortable being like, I suck at this, how do I get better at it? So I just think that's, if you can build that culture at your gym, that's golden. That's huge.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific one. I don't know if I'd come up with a better one, but I'm listening, I'm hearing the like consistency. Ultimately, I think it comes down to just giving a shit about the fact that if somebody's coming to you asking for help, it's because they want it. Then obviously you hopefully as the coach have the tools in your toolkit and pull out the right one. And then there's that connection between like, here's the athlete, here's the solution. How do I communicate that so that they marry up and, we get the best out of that athlete. So I think we did it.
Yeah.
Baseline training phase 3 starts next Monday, which is the 27th of June, 2020.
Magazine Day.
June 27th. Baseline training phase 3. You can head to teammisfit.com to get signed up. You can go to the SugarWOD marketplace. You get a free 2-week trial there because we're super friendly about that. But man, best time to join. We've got heavy back squatting. We've got some skill work that's leading us down the road of improving the Olympic lifts later on. We're continuing with that push up and pull up progression, as well as introducing the muscle up. So you've got athletes who worked super hard over the last 6 weeks. Maybe they now have that requisite skill that you talked about, Sherb, to get over the rings. But fear not, there's going to be plenty of the fitness and conditioning as well.
Also, don't forget about Misfit Summer Camp, misfit.camp, August 19th, 20th, and 21st. It's going to be a good time. If you listen to our other podcast, you probably heard Drew talk about it a little bit, but it's a little bit of like true summer camp fashion. We're going to have a bunch of high-level athletes leading campers through various workouts and tasks and things. So going to be a really good time. Yeah, give me a sandwich.
All right, you
give
see
me a
this
bologna
2012
sandwich.
Mazda Outback. You're going to need to grab that hose. You're going to need this. You're going to need some soap. All right, we're going to clean this.
What an endorsement for the camp.
Some of you
wash Hunter's car.
Let's detail maybe the inside. Yeah, it's going to be, I don't know.
It's going to be a good time.
They're going to be a good time.
Anyway, misfit.camp, August 19th, 20th, and 21st.
All right, teammisfit.com for your affiliate programming. We'll see you guys next time.